Sahana vavatu Sahano bhunaktu Sahaviryam karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Namo Bhagavate Vaivasvataya Mrityave Brahma Vidyacharyaya Nachiketase cha. Humble prostrations to one and all. So in the last class, we were discussing about the samsara vriksha, the samsara tree. And the purpose of describing this samsara tree is only one. Let us pay attention to the primary root of this samsara tree. And what is this primary root? It is nothing but the self in us, the supreme self in us, which is Brahman, which is pure consciousness. So the Upanishad is asking us to turn our attention to the self within. Various reasons are given as to why we should turn to the self. Reason number one, it is the only reality in this samsara. And therefore, the only way to come out of this samsara vriksha, come out of sorrow due to this illusory world of experience, the only way to come out of sorrow is to turn to the reality and not get caught in the illusory world. Reason number two, that Lord who is the self in us is the supreme controller of this universe. The whole world is existing in this self. The universe has no existence apart from the self. Everything in this world, all the cosmic forces function efficiently only by gaining the power from Him out of fear of Him. Therefore, even out of fear, we must turn to Him, the Supreme Self in us. Reason number three, if we ignore this truth in us, then we are born again and again in this painful samsara. Therefore, even to escape from this birth-death cycle, we must seek the Supreme Self alone. And now, in the next verse, another reason is given why we should seek the Supreme Self even while living in this world, even in this life. Verse number 5. Yatha darshe tathatmani Yatha swapne tatha Pitṛloke Yathapsu pariva dadrishe Tatha gandharvaloke Chhaya tapayoriva brahmaloke. Here, a great truth about different worlds is revealed. How clearly can we experience the Supreme Self in different worlds? That is what is mentioned here. How easy is spiritual sadhana in different worlds? How easy or difficult it is? That is what is mentioned here. So first, in this world is called as Martyaloka, Bhuloka. So how clearly can we experience the self in this world of mortals? So it is said, Yatha Adarshe Tatha Atmani. Yatha Adarshe, just like in the mirror. Tatha Atmani, in the same way, in one's own self. So, we can see our own Supreme Self like we see ourselves in the mirror. So, Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, Atmani means Nirmali Bhutayam Swabuddhau, in one's own pure intellect. So, how clearly we see our face in a clean mirror, so clearly we can see the self, we can see our own self in this world. Meaning absolutely clear. If the mind is pure, we can experience our own self very clearly. So that is the advantage of striving for self-realization in this world. In a clean mirror, how clearly we see our face, with the same clarity we can experience ourselves in a purified intellect. Now comes the experience of the self in the Pitṛloka, the world of ancestors. How clearly can we see the self in Pitṛloka? See the next statement. Yatha swapne tatha Pitṛloke. In the world of ancestors, Pitṛloka, the experience of the self is as clear as our experience of dream. Swapnaloke. Yatha swapne. Now, compare the dream state with waking state. Which is more clear? In the waking state, everything is clear and logical. In the waking state, there is a continuous and uninterrupted flow of events. But in the dream state, we find that the things are not very clear. Everything appears jumbled up and sometimes illogical also. And the duration of the dream is also very less compared to the waking state. Why is dream state not as clear as waking state? Dream state is not as clear as waking state because dream state is a byproduct of waking state. The deep impressions in the waking state lead to the formation of dream state. The contents of the dream state come from the waking state. The impressions gathered in the waking state, with those impressions, the dream state is formed. Deeper the impressions in the waking state, clearer the dream, longer the dream. Because the dream state is a byproduct of the waking state, the dream state cannot be as clear as the waking state. The byproduct cannot be as clear as the original. Hence, the dream state is ever inferior, ever unclear compared to the waking state. So, in the Pitṛloka, the experience of the self is like the experience of dream state, meaning it is not very clear. Why is the experience of the self in the Pitṛloka not very clear? Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, Karma Phala Bhoga Asaktatvat. because of the craving for karma phala, because of the craving for the enjoyment of karma phala, because of this the mind is impure, and because of this impurity of the mind, experience of the self is difficult in Pitṛloka. Now, to understand this, we have to understand who are the people who go to Pitṛloka. So, people who are attached to family life, they are the ones who go to Pitṛloka. Why do they go to Pitṛloka? They go to Pitṛloka because they think of family tradition. They give lot of importance to the family lineage. In life, they give very much importance to the family lineage, the ancestors. They are attached to family relationship. The law is, whatever thoughts we entertain, to such worlds we go. Whatever we give importance to such worlds we go. So here is a person who gives importance to the family and family related thoughts. So naturally, such people go to the world of ancestors. They go to Pitṛloka. So those who are extremely attached to the world, to the worldly relations, to the worldly pleasures, those who are extremely attached to family life, those who pray to God only for family's prosperity, for family's welfare and well-being, such people go to Pitṛloka. So, striving for self-realization in Pitṛloka is very difficult, because the mind is filled with impurities due to various family related attachments. Such an impure mind cannot have a clear vision of the self because the mind is impure. An impure mind will have only a blurred vision of the self, colored vision of the self, imperfect vision of the self. It is only in a clean, pure mind we can have perfect vision. This is true even in this world also. Purer the mind, clearer the vision of the self. This is the point. Now comes Gandharvaloka. What about Gandharvaloka? Yatha apsu pari iva dadrishe tatha Gandharvaloke. So here, pari and dadrishe should be taken together. So it will become paridadrishe. So the line will be Yatha apsu tatha Gandharvaloke paridadrishe. The experience of the self in Gandharvaloka is Yatha apsu, just like our reflection in water. So just as we see our reflection in water, how clear it is, so clear is the self in the world of Gandharvas. So just like we see our reflection in water, so is the vision of the self in Gandharvaloka. Gandharvaloka is a world of artists, musicians, dancers, the world of talented people. The world where people find joy in reveling in their talents, abilities, etc. So these are the people who give importance to their talents and abilities. Such people, they go to Gandharvaloka. Here also, the vision of the self is not very clear, like the reflection in water. How is the reflection in water? Bhagwan Shankaracharya says, Avibhakta Avayava Atma Rupam. When we see our reflection in water, we don't see a clear demarcation of our form. The boundaries are vague, not very clear. So compared to the reflection in mirror, reflection in water is not very clear. That means it is difficult to gain self-realization in Gandharvaloka also. The essence of the whole discussion is this: a mind which is attached to any worldly thing is unfit for self realization. Because a mind which is attached to the world is a colored mind. A colored mind will have a colored understanding of the self. And self is like a crystal free from all colors. So when we try to see the colorless self through the colored mind, we see a colored self. So what we see is a colored self and not the colorless self. What we see is a projection of the self imagined by our colored mind and not the self as it is. Hence, a colored mind, colored due to its likes and dislikes, is an unfit instrument for realizing the self. This is the point. Please remember, both Pitṛloka and Gandharvaloka, they are all different colonies in Swargaloka. They all belong to Swargaloka only. So what does it mean? So people who have led a clean, disciplined family life, sacrificing for family members, deserve Swargaloka. Also, people who have lived a disciplined life, disciplining themselves in a particular art form, they have lived a life of sadhana, mastering a particular talent. Lot of sense control is necessary. In this way, they have lived a life of sense discipline. So those who have lived a noble life, those who have lived a disciplined life, and in the process giving joy to others through their worldly talents, such people also, they deserve Swargaloka. Now interestingly, in this verse, Narakadilokas are not mentioned. Pitṛloka, Gandharvaloka, Martyaloka, Naraka and Brahmaloka. Narakadilokas are not mentioned here. Narakadilokas are for those criminal-minded, selfish, sensuous people who have lived for themselves and have given only pain to others. They don't get happiness even in this world, forget about attaining Swargaloka. So for those criminal ones, impure ones, there is no happiness here or hereafter. They go to the lower inferior worlds, and hence possibility of self-knowledge in such lower inferior worlds are not discussed here at all, because there is no such possibility. Now comes Brahmaloka. So with what clarity can we experience the self in Brahmaloka? So what is mentioned here is Chaya tapa iva Brahmaloke. In Brahmaloka, the self is clearly and distinctly experienced like shade and light. How clearly we are able to differentiate between shadow and light, darkness and light, so clearly we can see the difference between self and non-self. Nobody can ever mistake light to be darkness or darkness to be light. It is impossible to mistake one for the other. So too, here in this world, Brahmaloka, the highest world, or sometimes it is also called as Satyaloka, in this world, self is clearly seen as light and non-self is clearly seen as darkness. Meaning it is absolutely clear, without any ambiguity, without any doubt. There is no gray area. Everything is clear like black and white. Why is it that they are able to see it so clearly? It is so because people in Brahmaloka have extremely pure minds, and therefore everything is clear to them. Maya cannot delude them. But then Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, Sacha dushprapaha atyanta vishishta karma jnana sadhyatvat. To reach Brahmaloka is extremely difficult. Dushprapa. Because one has to do lot of upasana, lot of rituals, lot of sadhana needs to be done to reach there, which is very, very difficult. So reaching Brahmaloka is extremely difficult. So therefore, what is the conclusion? Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, Tasmat Atmadarsanaya iheva yatnah kartavyah iti abhiprayah. So therefore, the purpose of mentioning this verse is this. We should strive for self-realization here only. Iheva yatnah kartavyah. The vision of the self in this world is like reflection in mirror, very clear. In Pitṛloka, it is like dream, very hazy. In Gandharvaloka, it is like reflection in water, not very clear. In Brahmaloka, it is like light and shadow, very clear, but that world is very difficult to reach. Only real tapasvis who have done tapas for a long time, a lot of tapas, austerity, such people only reach those worlds. So therefore, we are left with only one option, and that is, may we strive for self-realization here itself. This world is the best world, and this life is the best life for self-realization. This is the point. Now, how to gain this self-knowledge in this world? So self-knowledge has to be gained through right understanding of the self. How to gain that right understanding? That is the topic in the next verse. Verse number 6. Indriyanam prithak bhavam udayastamayau chayat prithak utpadyamananam matva dhiro na shochati. So what is the right kind of understanding we have to develop about the self? So it is said here, Indriyanam prithak bhavam. Understand that the self has an existence, bhavam, bhava means existence, which is very different, prithak, which is very different from the body, mind, senses, indriyanam. The self has an existence which is very different from the indriyas. The self versus the BMI, they are two different things with contradicting properties. How are their properties different from each other? So the first property, Indriyanam utpadyamananam. The senses are born. There is an utpatti. The senses are born, and therefore it has a cause. These senses are an effect of a cause. It has come from something. From where has these senses come from? So those who have studied Tattvabodha, they know that all these sense organs have come from the sattvic element, sattvic aspect of the five elements, especially the jnanendriyas. So we have studied there, Shravanendriya, the organ of hearing, has come from the sattvic aspect of Akasha, space. The Tvagendriya, the organ of touch, has come from the sattvic aspect of Vayu, air. The Chakshurindriya, the organ of sight, has come from the sattvic aspect of Agni, fire. The Rasanendriya, the organ of taste, has come from the sattvic aspect of Jala, water. Granendriya, organ of smell, has come from the sattvic aspect of Prithvi, earth. And the mind has come from the collective sattvic aspect of the subtle five elements, apanchikrita panchamahabhutas. So those who want elaborate discussion on this, please refer to Tattvabodha. This is the fundamental text for Vedanta. So, what is said here? Indriyanam utpadyamananam. All these sense organs and the body and the mind all have utpatti, they have a birth. Hence, they are all effects born out of the five elements. Five elements are the cause. These organs, body, mind, intellect, etc., they are the effects. What about the self? Self is not born out of five elements. The pure consciousness has no cause, it is causeless. So, this is one contradicting property, differentiating property between the self and the senses. Another contradicting property, differentiating property is mentioned next. What is that? Udayastamayo. There is Udaya and there is Astama. The body, the mind, the intellect, the senses, they are manifest in the waking state and they are dissolved or they become unmanifest in the deep sleep state. They come and go, they appear and disappear. But what about pure consciousness? The pure consciousness is ever there in all the three states. So, this is another differentiating property between the self and the body, mind, intellect. Hence, there is prithak bhavam. The two are totally different with contradicting properties, like light and darkness. So, why self alone is the unchanging reality? Two reasons are given here. Reason number one, that which has a cause cannot be the ultimate truth. That which is born out of five elements cannot be the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth must be causeless. It must be beginningless. It must not have utpatti, birth. BMI and the senses have birth, they have a cause, hence they cannot be the ultimate truth. The self is causeless, hence it is the ultimate truth. This is reason number one. Reason number two, that which has Udaya and Astama, that which comes and goes, cannot be the ultimate reality. The reality must be ever existent. Even when the illusory world is projected, it should be existent. Even when the illusory mind is active, it should be existent. It should be unconditionally existent. This is a sign that something is real. The reality must never become absent. The body, mind, intellect, senses, they come during the waking state and go away and disappear in deep sleep state. Hence, they cannot come under the category of ultimate reality. Whereas, the self does not come and go. It is there in all the three states. Hence, the self is ultimately real, absolutely real. This is reason number two given in this verse. Hence, in short, self alone is real, rest everything else is unreal. This is called right thinking. What happens when we develop right thinking? Matva dhiraha na shochati. With this wisdom, with this right thinking, we become dhira, a wise person. What is the benefit of being spiritually wise? Na shochati. We become free from all sorrows. So this is the benefit of realizing the self. We become free from all sorrows. The sorrows always come from wrong notion. Right understanding can never give us sorrow. It is only the wrong notions, wrong understanding about the self that give us sorrow. So the only way to end all sorrow is to develop right understanding of the self. And spiritual knowledge gives us this right understanding. So what is right understanding? Death and destruction are only for the non-self, the body, mind and the intellect, and not for the self. And hence, there is nothing to grieve, there is nothing to lament, because in true sense, from the standpoint of pure consciousness, from the standpoint of Supreme Self, we never die. As Puja Gurudev used to say, everybody dies, every body dies, nobody dies. Every physical body has to die, but nobody dies. So therefore, differentiate between the self and the non-self and hold on to the self. Pay attention to the self. This is what we have to do if we desire to be free from all sorrows. What is the sadhana to be done to firmly abide in the self? The sadhana is go within. How to go within? That is the next verse. Verse number 7 and 8. So let us chant verse number 7. Indriyebhyah param manah manasas sattvam sattvadadhimahanatma mahato vyaktamuttamam. Indriyebhyah param manah. Higher than the senses is the mind. Manasah sattvam. Higher than the mind is sattvam, the intellect. Sattvadadhi mahanatma. Higher than intellect is mahanatma, the hiranyagarbha. Mahatah avyaktamuttamam. Higher than this mahatattva is avyakta. So this we had actually discussed earlier also. Verses 10 and 11 from the third Valli of the first chapter, we have discussed this. So similar verses are repeated here. So there we had discussed on what basis is one entity higher than the other. We had discussed this earlier also. Anyway, we will summarize the same points here. In Vedanta, one is higher than the other based on these factors. What are the factors? Number 1, sukshmatvat. Number 2, mahatvat. Number 3, pratyagatmatvat. Number 4, karanatvat. And number 5, niyamakatvat. So the first one is sukshmatvat. Sukshma means subtle. So that which is subtle is higher than that which is gross. A subtle entity is always higher than a gross entity. For example, the subtle thoughts are always higher than gross actions. And that is why actions are determined by our thoughts. Thoughts come first, then comes action. Therefore, we can say subtle thoughts are higher than gross actions. So the first one is sukshmatvat, because of subtlety. Second one, mahatvat, that which pervades a thing is always higher than that which is pervaded. Pervader is higher than the pervaded. Again, we can take the same example of thoughts and actions. Bodily actions happen only in the present, but the thoughts can pervade in the past and in the future. Again, bodily actions happen here in this body, but the thoughts can pervade anywhere and everywhere all over the world. Hence, thoughts pervade time and space. Thoughts, therefore, are higher than bodily actions. Mahatvat. The next one, pratyagatmatvat. Pratyak atma. Pratyak means inner. That which is inner is always higher than that which is outer. That which is inner is always closer to us, and that which is closer to us, inner to us, is higher in us. Taking the same example, mental thoughts are closer to us than the bodily actions. Thoughts are inner, actions are outer. Therefore, thoughts are higher than actions. Okay. The fourth one, karanatvat. Karana means cause. That which is the cause is always higher than that which is the effect. Karanam is always higher than karyam. Taking the same example, thoughts are the cause, bodily actions are the effect. From thoughts come bodily actions. Therefore, thoughts are higher than actions. The fifth one, niyamakatvat. That which is the controller, niyamaka means controller. That which is the controller is always higher than that which is controlled. Controller is always higher than the controlled. Based on the same example, our inner thoughts of the mind, they control our actions of the body. Therefore, thoughts are higher than actions. So based on these 5 laws, now we decide which is higher and which is lower. Now, by the way, a question may come. There are 5 laws given here. What if, according to one law, entity A is higher than entity B, and then according to another law, entity A is lower than entity B? If such a thing happens, how will we know which is higher, which is lower? According to one law, A is higher than B. According to another law, B is higher than A. If this happens, which is higher, A or B? So then our answer is, such a case is impossible. This can never happen. 2 laws can never contradict each other. Okay. Now, on the basis of these laws, let us briefly analyze the statements above. So, statement number 1, Indriyebhyah param manah. Higher than the sense organs is the mind. The mind is subtler than the senses. The mind pervades the senses. The mind is more closer and inner to us than the senses. Sukshmatvat, Mahatvat, Pratyagatmatvat. Mind is the cause of the senses to function. Karanatvat. And mind is the controller of the senses. Niyamakatvat. And therefore we can say our mind is higher than our senses. This is the way we have to analyze. In the same way, the next line. Manasaha sattvam uttamam. Compared to mind, sattvam is higher. Here sattva means intellect. So intellect is higher than the mind. The mind is controlled by the intellect. The decisions taken by the intellect has to be followed by the mind. So therefore, intellect controls the mind. Again, the intellect is able to see what the mind cannot see. The intellect is able to see the higher possibilities in the self. These higher possibilities are not seen by the mind addicted to its likes and dislikes. Hence, we can say intellect is more pervasive than mind also. Thus, by always, intellect is higher than the mind. The next one. Sattvat adhi mahan atma. Beyond the intellect is mahan atma. Here mahan atma means hiranyagarbha or mahat tattva, the totality of mind intellect. Samashti sukshma prapancha, we can see. The Vyashti is capable of functioning only by borrowing the power from Samashti. The individual is capable of functioning only by borrowing the power from the totality. The part can function only by borrowing the power from the whole. The totality controls the individuality. So in this sense, we can say Hiranyagarbha or Mahatattva is superior to intellect. Intellect gains its power to function from Hiranyagarbha alone. So therefore, Hiranyagarbha is superior, Mahatattva is superior to intellect. Sattvad adhi mahanatma. Now, if we start analyzing all these laws, since Hiranyagarbha is higher than intellect, what it means is Hiranyagarbha is nearer to us than our own intellect. It is closer to us. Hiranyagarbha is totality of mind intellect. It is nothing but Lord Himself. So therefore, closer we come to the Lord of our heart, the more we are able to understand others, love others, the more we are able to tune to others, the more we are able to be sensitive to others' needs. And reverse also is true. The more we are close to the Lord, the more we are loved by others as well. We become the recipient of love, respect, and reverence of others. The more and more we go nearer the Lord, the more and more our personality becomes sweet, because of which everyone, they tend to love us, respect us, revere us. Because as we are going nearer to the Lord, we are going nearer to others also. That vision of oneness, automatically comes to a person who goes deep within oneself. Okay, next level. Mahataha Uttamam Avyaktam. Higher than this Mahat Tattva is Avyakta. Higher than Mahat Tattva Hiranyagarbha is Avyakta. Because everything has emerged from Avyakta, that unmanifest state is what is Avyakta. That state of the whole creation during Pralaya, during dissolution, is an unmanifest state. Since Hiranyagarbha has come from the unmanifest state, therefore this unmanifest state, Avyakta, is higher than Hiranyagarbha. The cause is always higher than the effects. Avyakta is also called Karana Prapancha. So compared to Sukshma Prapancha, Karana Prapancha is higher. Because Sukshma Prapancha has come from Karana Prapancha. Just like in the individual. In the case of individual, Karana Sharira is higher than the Sukshma Sharira. Because Karana means cause. Karana Sharira is the cause of both Sukshma Sharira and Sthula Sharira. Hence, Karana Sharira in us is higher than both of them. In the same way with Samashti, the totality also. Karana Prapancha is higher than Sukshma Prapancha. What is higher than Avyakta? Next verse, verse number 8. Avyakta tu parah purushah vyapako linga evacha yam jnatva muchyate jantuhu amrutatvam cha gacchati. Avyakta tu param purushah. Avyakta tu parah purushah. Higher than Avyakta is parah purushah. Higher than Avyakta is that supreme being. So who is that supreme being? That supreme being is none other than our own self, the supreme self, the pure consciousness. That pure consciousness which is the primary root of samsara tree. The pure I in us. Urdhvamula, that root which is the highest. So what is that nature of that supreme being? Vyapakaha, it is all pervading. So that which is the highest must pervade everything and nothing should pervade it as per our law. Mahatvat. And the nature of supreme being is alingaha. Linga means attributes. So alinga means that without attributes. Meaning this supreme self does not have any linga, indicator, attribute like body, mind, senses, intellect, etc. So being the highest, it should be the subtlest. And being the subtlest, it should be free from everything perceptible to the senses or the mind. It should be free from everything gross and subtle. Alinga. What is the use of knowing the supreme being? Yam jnatva jantuhu muchyate. Knowing which this jantu means that which has life, jiva. So knowing which this jivatma is liberated. And amrutatvam cha gacchati, and attains immortality. So the law is very clear. If we identify with the body, we will experience the properties of the body. The property of the body is mortality. Hence, when we identify with the body, give importance to the body, we will experience only mortality. But if we identify with the self, we will experience the properties of the self. And what is the property of the self? The self is immortal. Hence, amrutatvam cha gacchati. That person attains amrutatvam, immortality. So the one who pays attention to the self, meditates on the self, gives importance to the self, he attains the property of the self, which is immortality. So, again and again, through all these verses, the loving guidance of the Upanishad is seek the self alone. That self which is the primary root of samsara vriksha, upon which the entire vriksha is existing. In a tree, root is unseen, tree is seen. So the mistake we make is we get attached to the seen tree, we ignore the unseen root. Upanishad says, don't make this mistake. The entire samsara tree of ego, the BMI, the OET, the PFT, if you see that BMI chart, that BMI chart also looks like an upsided a tree which is upside down. That is how that BMI chart also looks. Om, V, BMI, PFT, OET. So if you see the chart, Om is on the top, Urdhva Moolah. So that Om is that primary root, the Supreme Self, that Brahman, that unchanging reality, the pure consciousness in us. That is Om. Rest everything is down. So the entire samsara tree of ego is standing there only because we have ignored the root. The more we ignore Om, the more that tree will become prominent for us. And the more we pay attention to Om, the whole tree of samsara disappears. So the message of this Upanishad is Asanga Shastrena Dridhena Chitva, as is said in Bhagavad Gita. Chop this tree of transmigration. Because this tree is nothing but a tree of suffering. So chop this tree. Asanga Shastrena. By the acts of detachment. Sharpened by Viveka, right discrimination. So the whole of spiritual sadhana is withdraw the attention from the seen illusion, pay attention to the unseen reality, the self in us. Pay attention to the reality and the illusion automatically disappears. Ignore the reality and then the illusion rules our lives. When illusion rules our lives become miserable. So put an end to all miseries by paying attention to the reality in us, the self in us. In the language of devotion, it is called remembrance of God or holding on to the lotus feet of God. In the language of knowledge, we say abidance in the self, paying attention to the self. Both are one and the same. Devotion and knowledge, both the paths, they tell the same thing. Devotion uses the language of heart. Devotion uses the language of heart, yes. Language of emotion, language of mind. This is the language of devotion. And what is the language of knowledge? It is the language of the head, language of reason, language of intellect. So both are one and the same. Whether you call it abidance in the self or you call it holding on to the lotus feet of God, both are one and the same. Now, how to know this self? The next verse deals with it. This next verse we will see in the next class. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ। श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ।